When a sitting U.S. Senator looks the head of the FBI in the eye and says, "You're out of compliance with the law," it's not just a heated exchange, it's a constitutional warning. Because when the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country starts ignoring the rules that bind everyone else, that's not bureaucracy. That's danger. What you're about to hear isn't about budgets or red tape. It's about whether the FBI still answers to the law or to power itself that IT started like any other hearing. Papers shuffled, formal greetings, the kind of slow rhythm Washington uses to make chaos look organized. But Senator Van Hollen wasn't playing by that script. He came armed with something the FBI didn't have, a demand for accountability.
Raised on the Constitution because, as you know, in response to a question that the president was asked about whether he had to comply with the Constitution, he said, and I'm quoting, "I don't know." So it is important that we reaffirm everybody's obligation to comply with the Constitution, and I appreciate that was your answer broadly to the question asked by Senator Merkley. But you don't dispute the fact, and I'm quoting here from the Supreme Court opinion in Reno v. Flores, where Justice Scalia wrote, and I quote, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in deportation proceedings," end of quote. You don't dispute that?
I don't dispute that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, for the record, we understand that because, as you well know, the federal courts have found that there have been gross violations to date of many individuals' due process rights. Let me ask you a question about Judge Dugan, and I'm not going to get into about Judge Dugan, who was arrested, taken out in handcuffs from her courtroom. You agree that as director of the FBI, you should lead by example, right?
Try to.
Okay. Well, there's a confidentiality and media contacts policy within the Department of Justice guidelines that says specifically that DOJ personnel should not voluntarily disclose a photograph of a defendant unless it serves a law enforcement function or unless the photograph is already part of the public record in the case. Clearly, Judge Dugan's photograph was not already part of the public record in the case. So it appears that what you did was a violation of that policy, unless you can express a clear law enforcement purpose for having done that.
The simple law enforcement purpose is to show America that we investigate any individual who commits a crime, especially those in positions of public trust.
But do you agree with the presumption of innocence in the U.S. system?
Absolutely. As a public defender, that's what I fought for years. Well, but that's different than
no. But Mr. Director, this is one of the reasons why that guideline is there, so people, especially the director of the FBI, doesn't announce to the country that somebody's already been found criminally liable when they haven't. She hasn't, has she?
But that's not what we said, that she was criminally liable. We said she was arrested and showed it.
Yeah, we know she was arrested, but the issue is the photograph. I'm asking you, going forward, I hope as the leader of the FBI, you will comply with the guidelines of the FBI that everybody else is expected to follow.
I believe I have, and I will going forward.
Well, this seems like a direct violation of this guideline.
I guess we're in disagreement, Senator.
Well, unless you can tell me why that really serves a law enforcement function. So you're going to send out pictures of everybody that's arrested?
Lots of people that are arrested have pictures sent out.
I'm asking you as director of the FBI, is that going to be your policy, just to start saying?
No, we do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Well, the guidelines make clear that I think any normal interpretation of this suggests it's a violation. Look, we're a budget committee, an appropriations committee. We want to find a way to make sure that we properly resource the men and women who work at the FBI. I think that is a common goal, I hope. And I do just, Mr. Chairman, again, in closing, I understand you want to proceed, just so that we keep things going, but it is kind of hard to proceed without any budget. So.
I don't take you as critiquing our having a hearing.
No,
you're pleased to have a hearing, and I wish we had more to deal with than we do.
I do.
And
Congress had passed a law requiring every federal agency to submit a spend plan within 45 days of the fiscal year starting. 54 days had passed, and the FBI, under Director Patel, had sent nothing. Not a document, not an outline, not even a timeline. For a man running the nation's most secretive institution, silence was his chosen defense. "Will you comply with the law?" the senator asked plainly. Patel paused, shuffled, then said he'd work with OMB. No timeline, no firm answer, just bureaucratic fog. Van Hollen pressed again. "Can you give us a date?" Patel replied that he'd get back to you this week. That's when the senator dropped the hammer. "Right now, you're out of compliance with the requirements of the law," he said. The words landed like a courtroom verdict. This wasn't political theater. It was a reminder that in a democracy, power answers to oversight. Or at least, it's supposed to. Because what Patel did next said more than any statement could. Instead of acknowledging the lapse, he started passing the blame, claiming it was an interagency process, that the ball was in OMB's court. But the truth is, accountability doesn't get passed around. It starts at the top. And the top of the FBI was sitting right there, refusing to own it. That single moment revealed something deeper. When the nation's top law enforcement official can shrug off a legal obligation in front of Congress, what else can be ignored behind closed doors? The FBI's spend plan might sound like a minor technical document, but it's actually one of the few tools Congress has to see how taxpayer money is spent. It shows where resources go, what priorities get funding, what gets ignored, and whether the Bureau is acting within its mandate. Without it, Congress and the public are blind. Van Hollen wasn't just chasing paperwork. He was defending the principle that no agency, no matter how powerful, gets to decide which laws matter. He reminded Patel and the viewers at home that the 45-day requirement wasn't optional. It was written into the continuing resolution Congress passed. It was the law. And if the FBI can ignore one legal requirement without consequence, what's to stop others from doing the same? Patel's responses felt like a slow erosion of that principle. "I'll work with the department. I'll coordinate with OMB. We'll get back to you." Every phrase was designed to buy time, not provide answers. The senator wasn't fooled. He pointed out that this wasn't the first time the FBI had come up short. The year before, they'd provided a detailed spend plan. Now just a paragraph. A single, hollow page in place of accountability. But Van Hollen didn't stop there. He pushed into the second issue, the missing budget justification. That's the document Congress uses to understand why the FBI is requesting money and how it plans to use it. Without it, the Oversight Committee is working blind. The senator reminded Patel that it's Congress's job to write the budget, but without proper justification from agencies like the FBI, lawmakers can't do theirs. Patel again deferred, saying he'd work with the department. Translation: delay, obfuscate, repeat, and then came the contradiction that exposed everything. Just the day before, Patel testified in the House that the FBI's current budget request wasn't enough to meet its mission. He said it needed roughly another $1 billion to function properly. Yet in front of Van Hollen, he suddenly backtracked, claiming he'd make it work. That switch wasn't just inconsistency. It was politics wrapped in doublespeak. He couldn't defend a broken system, so he tried to make it sound like flexibility. Van Hollen wasn't having it. He pointed out that the FBI's own director was admitting under oath that the current budget couldn't meet the agency's mission, while the administration's proposal didn't reflect that need. In other words, even the people running the system knew it was flawed, but no one wanted to fix it. Because fixing it means transparency. And transparency exposes priorities that many in power would rather keep hidden. What makes this moment so striking isn't just Patel's evasiveness. It's what it represents. Over time, agencies like the FBI have become so powerful, so insulated, that accountability feels like an inconvenience. Lawmakers request reports, they get silence. Deadlines pass, no consequences follow. And slowly, the balance of power shifts, not through coups or crises, but through quiet defiance. The senator's phrase, "You're out of compliance with the law," was more than procedural. It was a signal flare. Because when the FBI, the agency tasked with enforcing the law, fails to follow it, it undermines the very foundation it's sworn to protect. It tells every smaller agency, every official, every contractor that compliance is optional. That accountability is negotiable. And that's how democracy starts to hollow out, not through loud revolutions, but through soft indifference. Think about it. If Congress doesn't know how the FBI is spending your tax dollars, who does? If the agency can delay, redact, and withhold information at will, who's really in charge? The elected officials or the unelected power brokers behind the scenes? The line between law enforcement and political machinery blurs. Oversight becomes a performance, not a process. And that's where Patel's role becomes even more significant. He's not just any bureaucrat. He's a political loyalist, someone whose rise through the ranks has been defined by allegiance over independence. So when he treats a legal obligation as negotiable, it fits a pattern. It's the same pattern we've seen across agencies where compliance bends under political pressure. When leaders stop seeing oversight as duty and start seeing it as interference, the system starts to rot from within. Van Hollen's calm persistence cut through that fog. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't grandstand. He simply laid out the facts. The law required a spend plan within 45 days. It's now 54. The FBI didn't comply. The record would show that. That's the kind of moment that might slip past casual viewers, but it's one of the most important in the entire hearing. Because it put in plain language something few are willing to say out loud. The FBI is failing to meet the same legal standards it enforces on everyone else. It's easy to dismiss hearings like this as political theater, but they're not. They're checkpoints in a system designed to prevent power from running wild. When those checkpoints are ignored, democracy loses its brakes. Today it's a missing spend plan. Tomorrow it's unmonitored surveillance, secret directives, or budgets funneled into programs no one outside the Bureau even knows exist. The FBI's budget isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a mirror of its priorities. Where the money goes tells you what the agency values. Is it investing in counterterrorism, cybersecurity, public corruption investigations? Or is it redirecting funds toward political projects, surveillance expansions, or internal programs shielded from oversight? Without transparency, no one can tell. And that's precisely why those documents matter. Van Hollen's confrontation wasn't about embarrassing Patel. It was about drawing a line. If the head of the FBI can't meet the same legal standards expected of every federal employee, then the concept of equal before the law becomes meaningless. Because once the top of the chain stops caring about compliance, that attitude trickles down. Accountability dies quietly, replaced by convenience. It's also important to remember that these hearings aren't just for senators. They're for the public record. They exist so that ordinary citizens, people like you, can see what's happening behind the polished statements and staged sound bites. When the cameras capture a senator saying, "You're out of compliance," it's not just for political points. It's a documented reminder that even in the halls of power, someone is still trying to hold the line. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Accountability doesn't work unless people pay attention. That's why these moments matter. Because while Patel's answers may fade from the headlines, the precedent remains. Each ignored deadline, each vague promise, each unfulfilled report chips away at the foundation of democratic oversight. And unless citizens notice, question, and demand better, those cracks become permanent. So, what does this all mean for you watching at home? It means the system only works when those inside it are forced to answer for their actions. When they fail to do so, it's not just a missed deadline. It's a missed chance to protect your right to know where your money, your trust, and your laws are going. Van Hollen's warning wasn't directed only at Patel. It was directed at all of us. Because oversight doesn't die in one big moment. It fades away when people stop caring about it. In the end, Patel's evasive answers and Van Hollen's persistence tell the same story from two sides of power. One side clings to secrecy. The other fights for sunlight. And the choice between them will decide how transparent and accountable this country remains. Because if the FBI can ignore Congress, it can ignore anyone. If compliance becomes optional, justice becomes selective. And once justice becomes selective, democracy starts to crumble, quietly, efficiently, and without headlines. That's why this hearing matters more than most people realize. It wasn't about budgets. It was about integrity. It wasn't about politics. It was about principle. And it wasn't about one senator versus one director. It was about the American people versus the slow erosion of accountability itself. The next time someone tells you congressional hearings don't matter, remember this moment. A senator stood up, read the law aloud, and told the FBI director to his face, "You're out of compliance." That's what real oversight looks like. That's what democracy sounds like when it's still fighting to stay alive. That if you believe that no one, not presidents, not directors, not agencies, should be above the law, then make sure this story doesn't disappear. Share this video. Subscribe for more updates. And most importantly, keep watching, keep questioning, and keep demanding the transparency that every democracy depends on.